This video is going to give you some helpful hints to complete your Chapter 1 homework. And the first two problems in your homework are problems 1.1 and 1.2. And I just want to give you a hint on those two problems to look in the textbook. On pages 2, 3, and 4, they're going to be in the text themselves or actual formal definitions, and that's going to help you answer those questions, the first two questions on the homework. On question 1.6, there is a graphic in the text on page 5. It looks like this in the textbook on page 5. Okay, and in the graphic here on page 5, you'll be able to see how they're defining what the variable is in the table, okay, what they're using as the observation and measurements here, and then what the element is and what those terms mean with regards to the text. Okay, so that's my hint for you on problem 1.6 is to use that graphic to help you solve that problem there. All right, on 1.8, on question 1.8, it wants you to determine if a variable is quantitative or qualitative, and this is what I always remember. If I have a quantitative variable, I'm usually going to have units because it's going to be a numerical type value, okay? And so some examples of quantitative variables are going to be like time or number of years or number of houses or something of those natures, okay? They're going to be amounts, essentially. Where qualitative, those are going to be more like categories or labels. Okay, so it's going to be like the make of a car, like a car type. Okay, or like graduation classification. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Okay, those are going to be categories or labels, and those are going to be qualitative variables. That's also going to help you with question 1.10. The thing that I found the easiest for this question was to answer kind of like A and B together and then answer C and D together. So I kind of made a list here in my notes when I was working on these of like, these are the qualitative variables, these are the quantitative variables, and that answered A and B for that question. And then I answered C and D to attach continuous and discrete to the quantitative variables. And so just to make sure we have this, discrete variables, okay, that's going to be something that's like countable. Oops. Like the number of cars, okay? Whereas continuous is going to be like time. Okay, those are both going to have units. They're both quantitative variables, but then they break down the different kinds of quantitative variables. And in the text, it's on page 8. If you want to look at at the different examples that they give on that problem. All right, for problem 1.12, there's two different types of data, okay, that we're going to be looking at in these problems. One is cross-section data, and then the other is time series. So cross-section data is when you're comparing data over different elements. Whereas time series data, cross-section data, time series data. Time series data is when you're going to be comparing data over a time period. So that's going to be really helpful if you're looking at those problems in problem 112. To think about, like, am I comparing the same kind of data across different elements, or am I comparing maybe like one company but over time? And so that's going to help you answer those questions on 112. On question 119, two more here, just to give you a couple hints. Okay, keywords for population I always look for is when you see that it's all of something. Keywords for sample is when it is part. Okay, still read into the question and make sure you're really thinking about, like, is this all or is this just part that I'm using to kind of predict something about everything else. But that's always helpful to me when I'm reading the different scenarios to think, okay, am I just talking about part of this? Is this a sample of the entire piece, or am I actually talking about the entire population here? And that helps me kind of decide which data I'm looking at. All right, the last question that I'm going to give you some support on here is question 1.38. And when I personally saw this as the list of the grocery amounts, I didn't really like it in the way that it was listed out to the side, so I created it like in a table. So it tells us in the problem that Y is going to denote the amount spent. Okay, by the customer. And then just to kind of review, since it's amount spent, okay, that's going to be a quantitative variable because it has some units here, it has dollars. And then I liked to put the data then in this table like this and list it out this way. So 216, 184, 35, 92, 144, 175, 11, and 57. Okay, and then it just allowed me to see the data a little bit more clearly than trying to read it from the text. And then the three things that they want us to find in part A is they want us to find the sum of the Y's. That's what this symbol right here is going to tell us to do, is it's going to tell us to find the sum, which means just add all Y amounts. Okay, and so you can show me when I'm scoring this for you, you can just show me some work here, but basically you're just going to add this up. You're just going to find the total here. Okay, the total amount. But we're wanting you to know what that notation means, okay? And that notation means to do that. And then B and C, the notation looks really similar, but they're actually asking you to do two different kinds of calculations here. On B, because of the parentheses, okay, it's telling you to work inside the parentheses first. So find the total first, which you found that in part A, okay? Add this all up and then square it. So you're gonna take your answer that you get in part A and then square that. And you can use a calculator for any of these questions here. You just need to make sure you're showing me some work when I'm scoring these. And same thing on like your quizzes and your tests, okay? And then on C, it says to find the sum of the y squares. Now notice there's no parentheses here. And so actually what this wants us to do is square all the values first, then find the total. Okay, so that would look like 216 squared, and then 184 squared, and then 35 squared. So it wants us to square the values first, and then after we've done all of that, then find the total. And that's the difference between B and C and those two notations. This one, since of the parentheses, we're gonna add first, then square. No parentheses, okay, we're gonna use order of operations here. We're going to use the exponent first, and then we're going to add. I hope you guys find that helpful in completing your first homework assignment.